There isn't always a clear moment, not always a thunderclap or a dramatic goodbye. Sometimes, the biggest truths arrive softly like a door that doesn't open, a phone that doesn't ring, a name that never gets called. The day I realized I wasn't anyone's child didn't come with a scream. It came with a silence so loud it hollowed me out. I must have been around 9, old enough to notice the difference, but too young to understand it. I was sitting in a waiting room, plastic chairs, fluorescent lights, the smell of floor polish, and something sterile. Other kids were there, too. Some with adults holding their hands, some cradled in arms, some whispered to gently. And then there was me, just waiting, alone. At first, I thought maybe they were late, whoever they were. Maybe someone forgot the time or got stuck in traffic. I held on to that thought like it was oxygen. But as the minutes stretched into hours, I looked around and noticed that no one looked confused about who they belonged to. No one kept glancing at the door, hoping a familiar face would appear. No one else had that kind of waiting stitched into their spine. It was in that stillness, that too quiet stillness, that something cracked open inside me. I wasn't anyone's child. Not really. Not in the way that word child is supposed to feel. I was in someone's file. I had a case number. I had been someone's responsibility. But I wasn't someone's child. That truth didn't come in a flood. It came slowly, over years, showing up in the little things. Like how no one asked me what I wanted for dinner. How no one knew my favorite color, or the way I liked to sleep with one foot out of the blanket. How birthdays came and went with maybe a cupcake, but no candles. No wishes whispered into flame. Being nobody's child is like living in parentheses. You're there, but not quite part of the sentence. People see you, but they don't stop long enough to hear you. You learn to make yourself small, to shrink your needs, to apologize for taking up space, because space isn't something you're ever sure you're allowed to have. I learned early how to be polite, how to be quiet, how to be easy. Not because I was naturally that way, but because being difficult meant moving again. Being loud meant drawing attention, and attention, in my world, wasn't safe and meant questions. Files, sometimes yelling, sometimes worse. So I made myself manageable, swallowed my feelings, smiled on command, but beneath the surface, there was always this ache, this aching need to belong. I didn't want perfection. I didn't want grand gestures. I just wanted someone to miss me when I left a room. Someone to remember how I liked my toast or that I hated thunder. Someone to sit beside me during bad dreams, not to fix it, just to stay. I didn't know how much of me was shaped by the lack until I started growing older. Until I started seeing how other people move through the world with certainty, with history, with roots. I didn't have roots. I had relocations. I had folders. I had visits that always ended too soon or dragged on too long. There was a time I tried to pretend, tried to convince myself that maybe, just maybe, someone would come back. That the door would open one day and someone would say, "There you are. I've been looking for you." But that day never came, and I got tired of waiting. I got tired of hoping. Hope is heavy when it's unreturned. So I did what many of us do. I became my own parent. I learned how to braid my own hair, how to make eggs just right, how to sew up holes in socks and in my heart. I became resourceful, resilient. People praised that, said I was so mature, so strong, so independent. But they didn't understand that those were scars, not medals. No one ever asks why a child becomes independent. They just applaud the survival and ignore the loss. The day I realized I wasn't anyone's child was also the day I began to build something new. I didn't know it then. I just knew I was tired of being invisible, tired of feeling like a placeholder in other people's lives. I wanted to exist, not just survive. And so, I started naming myself, not with words, but with actions. I became the one who showed up for others, the one who remembered birthdays, the one who sat beside friends in their pain because I knew what it felt like to sit alone in mine. I poured love into the cracks of strangers because I knew how deep the cracks could run. I found comfort in stories, books, movies, music. They gave me language for feelings I couldn't explain. They gave me families I could borrow, even if only for a page or a scene. They gave me mothers who sang lullabies and fathers who waited at windows. I knew it wasn't real, but it was enough to remind me what could be. Eventually, I stopped asking why I was left, stopped wondering what was wrong with me, because the truth is, there was never anything wrong with me. The problem wasn't that I wasn't lovable. It was that the people meant to love me didn't know how, or couldn't, or wouldn't, and that hurt. Yes, but it wasn't a reflection of my worth. I am not defined by who didn't stay. I am not the sum of my absences. I am the person who kept going, who kept rising, who learned how to hold herself up even when the world gave her nothing to lean on. If you're listening to this, and you felt that same hollow truth, if you've ever sat in a room and realized you weren't anyone's child, I need you to know something. You still belong. Not in the way the world might define it. Not with a last name etched in stone or a family tree with sturdy branches. But in the way you show up. In the way you care. In the way you keep choosing to stay alive even when the silence screams otherwise. You are someone. You matter. You are not a mistake. You are not the paperwork. You are not what was missing. You are what survived. You are what became. And now, you are what can begin. You can begin to speak to yourself with the voice you always needed. You can begin to build a life where your presence is no longer conditional. You can begin to love others without losing yourself. You can begin to parent the parts of you that never got to be children. You can begin again, and again, and again. Because you are not nobody's child. You are your own, and you are worthy of every kind of love you never received. This isn't the story I wanted, but it's the one I lived. And in telling it, I find pieces of myself returning. I find echoes of others who've walked this same path quietly, bravely, unseen. This is for us, the unmothered, the unfathered, the ones who grew up learning to raise themselves with nothing but instinct and hope, the ones who felt forgotten but refused to forget themselves. We are not broken. We are becoming, and we are not alone.